Many of you have asked me to weigh in on the Roger Fortson shooting. Most of you from the "cops are tyrants" crowd believe this was an unjustified shooting. Those of you from the "thin blue line" crowd believe this cop should be exonerated. I'm going to do my best to look at this strictly from the facts and the law. Probably half of you are going to be disappointed. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With cold, blunt analysis, cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to analyze this situation as fairly as I can. I will view the shooting from both perspectives, the cops and the citizens. You can too. We are mature adults with working brains who have evolved to use reason and critical thinking to arrive at sensible answers. Neither the cop nor the citizen went into this situation looking to hurt anyone. And if you really truly think that the cop knocked on their door looking for an excuse to shoot someone, then move on. I don't have any use for that mindset. For that reason, as soon as some imbecile yanks out the tired "you're a bootlicker" or "you're a racist" silliness, I'll delete that post. I want visitors to my channel to hold my audience in high regard and not think that they're a bunch of mindless nitwits. So, let the show begin.
Are they fighting or something?
He's saying that it happens frequently.
Okay.
But this time it sounded like it was getting out of hand.
Okay, which store?
So I'm not sure. 2 weeks ago I was walking by their apartment basically on this side. And I was hearing someone yell like, "Shut the up, like you stupid B word" and all this other stuff, and I heard a slap. Right after it, but I wasn't sure where it came from.
Okay.
And I couldn't call, I didn't want to call the police and
Which room is it?
1401.
1401, okay.
So she misidentifies the apartment number. Notice she said it very firmly. That's important because the cop doesn't have a whole lot of reason to believe that it's not apartment 1401 that is the trouble. There's no way for the cop to know otherwise, so he's working under the assumption that the problem lies behind the door of apartment 1401. That's a reasonable assumption to make to at least knock on the door and find out what's going on. Can we all agree on that? And if you're of the mindset that the police should never investigate citizens' complaints, well, oh boy. Okay. Now, complaints from people like Ben Crump that the cop was at the wrong apartment are extraordinarily unfair. The cop was where he was told the problem was. That part's not on him.
1401. But the girl sounded scared, the one that called. She said, she was like, it sounds like it's getting really out of hand.
So it's hit number 4, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. You mean fair? We stand out there and direct the other deputy that's coming with this area?
It's not, you're going to go to the fourth floor and it's going to be on this side.
Gotcha.
Okay, so it looks like somebody else identified the apartment as 1401, and she's just relaying that to the police officer. This is a tragic mistake on the caller's part, but she isn't to blame for the shooting. Whatever problems led to the shooting and whatever side of the shooting you take, she played no role in it. Just because you call the police to the scene of what you think is something they should investigate doesn't make you liable for what happens once the police arrive. If you think a bank robbery is in progress, you're not responsible if the police shoot someone who turns out later to be innocent. It is their job to determine what is going on and to act appropriately. The cop is probably listening in to see if he can hear anything going on the other side of the door. perhaps he thought he heard something? Okay, so the cop knocks on the door, doesn't announce himself as a police officer. If Fortson had opened the door now and stepped outside carrying his gun on his side, does the fact that the cop had not announced himself change anything?
Sheriff's office, open the door!
Now he announces himself. I think the cop was very lucky that Fortson didn't open the door earlier, because the cop would have had a much tougher time explaining why he shot a man dead after not announcing himself as being a law enforcement officer. But he is very clear here. The person on the other side of the door probably should have heard him pretty clearly. Wow. Okay, let's go back and play that in slow motion. Important to note, Fortson never pulls his gun up. They call that breaking the plane. He never pulls the gun up in a threatening manner. But we also have to keep in mind there wasn't a lot of time here. All right, so let's get some facts out of the way. The woman who called all this in didn't know the race of the person behind the door. At least there's no evidence of that. And for all of you moronic Rashad Ritchie fans who think calling the cops on a black man somehow makes her liable for his death, then here are the immortal words of your hero.
So I strategized that as soon as we pull up to the house, I was going to jump out of the car, go into the house, lock the doors, and call 911. Well, that's exactly what I did.
Also, keep in mind, this is a self-defense issue, not a Second Amendment issue. The NRA hasn't spoken up about this shooting because it has zero to do with the right to bear arms. Even if Fortson had no right to have the gun, he did, it wouldn't have mattered unless the cop knew he was in illegal possession when he knocked on the door. And even then, the relevance would be sketchy at best. So let's be clear, whether or not Fortson had a right to possess the gun is irrelevant. Also, Fortson's race played no role in the shooting. Nothing in the recorded audio indicates that the cop knew the race of the person behind the door of apartment 1401. Fortson's gun grabbed the cop's attention, not his skin color. Who in here really thinks that if Fortson was Caucasian, the cop would have thought, oh wait, he's white, therefore he's harmless. I'd better not shoot. You tell that story to Daniel Shaver or Dylan Noble. Next, the fact that the shooter is a police officer only has minimal impact on the right or wrong of the shooting. I looked, and Florida doesn't have special laws that pertain to an officer's use of deadly force in this type of situation. The officer isn't trying to stop an escapee or make an arrest. As it stands, the merits of the shooting center on the laws of self-defense. Fortson's character is also of no consequence. So you can save all the graduation pictures and Air Force portraits. They don't matter. By all accounts that I've read, Fortson was a good dude. But that changes nothing. If Fortson had a violent past and the cop knew that before knocking on the door, then Fortson's character might be an issue. As it stands, it doesn't matter whether Fortson was in the military, gave blood, or saved kids from burning cars. Completely irrelevant. Furthermore, Fortson's right to self-defense is of no consequence. Some have asked if Fortson would have been justified in defending himself if he had raised his gun to shoot the cop. I think probably not, but that has no bearing on the officer's right to self-defense. As I've said many times, both sides in a dispute can legitimately claim self-defense. One's right to self-defense doesn't negate the other's. We saw that in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where some tried to argue that Gage Grosskreutz and Anthony Huber had a right to defend themselves or the lives of others. Maybe they did, but that has no bearing on Kyle's guilt. Putting those issues aside does not settle the question. Was this a justified shooting? I think the state will come back and say it was. Here's what Florida law says about self-defense. Okay, Online Sunshine, the 2023 Florida statutes. A person is justified in using or threatening to use deadly force if he or she reasonably believes that using or threatening to use such force is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to himself or herself, or to prevent the imminent commission of a forcible felony. It goes on to say, a person who uses or threatens to use deadly force in accordance with this subsection does not have a duty to retreat and has the right to stand his or her ground if the person using or threatening to use the deadly force is not engaged in a criminal activity, as in a place where he or she has a right to be. So in this case, the officer is not required to backpedal. However, I think he could have, and possibly saved Fortson's life. I think the officer will claim that for a brief moment, he felt that his life was in danger, and I think he can make that claim stick. Do I personally consider it justified? You hear a knock on the door and someone yells, "Sheriff's office," but you can't see anyone when you look through the peephole. Why? Well, the cop feels that in order to protect himself from possible shots through the door, they stand away from the peephole, therefore shifting the danger onto the citizen. Are we just expected to assume that it is in fact a police officer on the other side of the door? Is it possible that criminals could use that as a ploy to get you to unlock the door so that they can invade your home? If you're going to open the door, like the police want you to, and you're not sure if it is the law on the other side, then having a gun on your side seems reasonable. Keep in mind that Fortson does not think this is a ploy by criminals. He is just being careful. I wear a seatbelt. That doesn't mean I'm expecting to get in a wreck. You might come back and say, well, you see what happens when you do. But that's a circular argument. We're debating on whether the police officer's actions were justified. You can't use the fact that the cop shot the dude dead to justify that which we are disputing. Also, keep in mind that it's not human nature to sit inside a house and let the cops knock on your door. You're going to feel compelled to open the door and find out what's up, especially if you haven't been doing anything wrong. People will point to shootings like this, wag their fingers, and say, this is why you don't open the door to cops. But shootings like this are extremely rare. I've opened the door to police officers on a number of occasions, and they've never shot me. But then again, this could be a regional issue. I live in a rural county in Oklahoma where the knock on the door is going to be a sheriff's deputy. And around here, we have more faith in our law enforcement than most other areas, I'm betting. Could the officer have simply backpedaled while pulling out his handgun? Would this have been a good tactic? In looking it over, I think so. Given what we know now, which wasn't available to the officer at the time, that probably would have saved Fortson's life. The cop might have tripped and found himself lying on his back, but Fortson was no threat. But that's hindsight. And I know what you're thinking. Tell us whether you think the shooting was justified. Personally, no, I don't think it was. This is a real tough one. Much like the officer in the shooting of Philando Castile, I think the officer here was a bit too skittish. Fortson never even attempted to raise his gun. This won't help the image of the Oskaloosa Sheriff's Office. The deputy that shot out the back window of a car after hearing an acorn fall on a car is from the same department. Yeah. Now, do I think the officer should be in jail? No, I don't think so. Here's why. The officer is compelled, but not required, to investigate an incident. He's not like you and me. We can walk away, but he realistically cannot. He has an obligation to his employer, the city, and the public to place himself in harm's way. Therefore, he is going to be inserted into situations where the odds of something tragic happening are far greater than the usual. So I think there needs to be special consideration for cases where no ill will was intended. In such a case, I think the best course of action is to chalk this up as a tragedy and send the officer on his way to a different line of work. The officer's actions here were not born from negligence or ill intent. He simply got rattled in a situation where the next cop might not have. And I don't think you can send people to jail for that. The city can pay out a truckload of cash to the survivors, although that won't do Fortson any good. And by the way, for all you ranting about qualified immunity, forget it. Qualified immunity clearly protects the officer in this shooting, justified or not. And qualified immunity only protects him from civil liability. You can't sue him for what happened. It has nothing to do with criminal prosecution. Do you understand? If this shooting interests you and you would like to see a pro-cop take, watch the Court TV edition where they invite 2 firearms experts onto the show. Unlike most Court TV shows, the special guests are not idiotic civil rights attorneys. If you want a pro-Fortson take, Rick Gore has one on Good Luck America. If you really want a stupid take, then go nowhere else but to Rashad Ritchie's Indisputable channel. I'll post links in the description below. Well, except for Rashad Ritchie's show, which I plan to ridicule in an upcoming episode. Like my video, subscribe to my channel. And yeah, I know half of you are going to be very mad at me. But you wanted my take, you got it.